Welcome back. We start our news bulletin from Indian-occupied Kashmir, where occupation forces have martyred 2 more youths in Pulwama district. Police said the Kashmiris were killed during a cordon and search operation in the Angirpura area of the district. The security forces cornered the Kashmiris before opening fire on them. Police said the operation is still underway in the village. Indian atrocities in the occupied valley have increased despite the fatal COVID-19 pandemic. The occupied valley is reeling under the Indian curfew and communications blackout since August 5, 2019. Meanwhile, Pakistan has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register its strong protest against ceasefire violations along the line of control. In a statement, Pakistan military's media wing says Indian forces conducted violations in Hajipir and Sank sectors, wounding a civilian critically. The military said a woman in Khwajabandi village sustained wounds due to indiscriminate fire of automatics, rockets and heavy mortars. In a statement, the Foreign Office said India's deliberate targeting of civilian populations is deplorable and against humanitarian laws. It said India has committed 940 ceasefire violations in this year so far. The office called on Delhi to respect 2003 ceasefire pact and allow the UN Military Observers Group to play its mandated role. With 32 casualties overnight, Pakistan has recorded its highest number of daily deaths from the new coronavirus. The Health Ministry said the death toll in the country has topped 400 with over 18,000 infections. It said more than 4,700 patients have recovered from the pandemic so far. The ministry said the total number of active cases in the country is nearly 13,000. The province of Punjab has the most number of cases with over 6,700 patients with infections. Earlier, medics said the total number of cases in the country are likely to reach 150,000 by the end of this month. Meanwhile, in Spain, the COVID-19 death toll has exceeded the 25,000 mark, with 276 fatalities in the past 24 hours, while Iran has reported 65 more deaths, bringing the total to over 6,100.
Russia showed further growth in cases with a new record of over 9,600 infections in a day, bringing the country's total to past 124,000. With 57 more fatalities, Russia's death toll also rose to 1,222. The number of confirmed coronavirus cases in Germany rose by 945 to 161,703. The death toll increased by 94 to 6,575. The Netherlands' number of cases has risen by 475 to nearly 40,000 with 98 new deaths. The Dutch Health Ministry said the country's death toll stands at over 4,800. The global death toll has crossed 238,000 with over 3.3 million people infected.
Moving on to the US, where the death toll from COVID-19 has crossed 65,000 as 1,788 people succumbed to the disease overnight. Meanwhile, the number of infection cases has topped 1.1 million, accounting for 1/3 of the global tally. Over the past 6 weeks, more than 30 million Americans have filed unemployment claims as the public pressure is mounting to reopen the country. This report will now tell you more.
U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly argued to end the lockdown measures amid the historic downturn in the American economy. Protesters across the country have also been demanding an end to the restrictions that have brought the nation to a standstill. In Michigan, protesters with firearms stormed the state capitol, demanding an end to the lockdown. In a tweet, Trump called armed protesters good people and asked the state governor to make a deal with them. Despite warnings of a second outbreak, the president remains hopeful of lower death toll in the U.S. than expected.
People were thinking in terms of 1.5 million lives lost to 2.2 without the mitigation, and hopefully we're going to come in below that 100,000 lives lost, which is a horrible number. Nevertheless, it's a horrible thing. It could have been stopped. It should have been stopped at the source, but it wasn't.
With about half of U.S. states closing in on the partial lifting of shutdown orders, Georgia led the charge with nearly every business free to reopen. In contrast, the worst-hit New York State said educational institutions will remain closed for the remainder of the academic year. California Governor Gavin Newsom said state's stay-at-home order will be altered in a matter of days.
I just want folks to know we're getting very close to making really meaningful augmentations to that stay-at-home order. We are, we said weeks, not months, about 4 or 5 days ago. I want to say many days, not weeks, as long as we continue to be prudent and thoughtful in certain modifications. We'll be making, I think, some announcements. But look, PPE is foundational in that, and we still have a lot of work to do.
Meanwhile, the White House blocked National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director Dr. Anthony Fauci from testifying in front of a congressional committee. In a statement, the White House called the move counterproductive and said it is committed to working with Congress to offer testimony at an appropriate time. Earlier, House Appropriations Subcommittee had sought Fauci's statement to examine Trump administration's response to the pandemic.
In another news, the UN has called for restraint amid protests in Lebanon over the deteriorating economic situation. Speaking in Geneva, UN official Rupert Colville said security forces must abide by international law while using force. Colville said the UN is deeply concerned by the renewed violence in Lebanon that left forces personnel wounded too. He said the violence is causing significant damage and destruction to public and private property. The UN official also appealed to protesters not to resort to violence and respect the property. So far, 1 protester has been killed and nearly 80 injured in violent clashes over high unemployment rates. Despite the violence, the country has reported over 700 cases of COVID-19 with 24 deaths. An independent UN human rights expert has warned the Israel's annexation plan will be a blow to the international order. In a statement, UN official Michael Lane cautioned it will undermine the prospects for a negotiated settlement. The UN Special Rapporteur said Tel Aviv's unilateral decision will subvert human rights in the region. He said the US is supporting and facilitating Israel's plans. Link added Washington is actively endorsing and participating in a flagrant violation of international law. The official said if the plan moves forward, it would lead to a cascade of bad human rights consequences. The UN expert said human rights violations by Israeli forces would only intensify after the annexation. In Iraq, ISIS has killed 10 members of Hashd al-Shabi forces in an ISIS attack in Salahuddin province. Iraqi state media said clashes broke out between the paramilitary unit and ISIS on several fronts in Makeshfa town and Balad city. In a statement, the Hashd said they have now taken control of the situation, pushing back ISIS fighters. It said the government has also sent reinforcements to supplement efforts and prepare for a possible retaliatory attack. This assault is believed to be one of the largest ISIS attacks since the armed group was defeated in December 2017. ISIS attacks in Iraq are on the rise since April, compared with previous months this year. U.S. Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad says Taliban attacks on the Afghan forces are endangering the gains in peace process. Khalilzad said the attacks have resulted in a response by the troops, which is a negative trend and must be reversed. Citing a UN report, Khalilzad said civilian casualties in Afghanistan have dropped by 29% as compared to last year, but he said civilians still suffer from IEDs, targeted assassinations and other consequences of the ongoing war. The U.S. envoy said all parties must act now to end the violence in the country. He said the Taliban and the government needs to accelerate efforts to release prisoners and lower violence. Khalilzad said both of these steps are the fastest means to intra-Afghan negotiations and a comprehensive permanent ceasefire. He said Afghans must unite in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. The Taliban have rejected the Afghan Interior Ministry's claim that the group has killed thousands of civilians in the last 3 months. The group spokesman Zabiullah Mujahid said the civilian casualties were caused by airstrikes and shelling conducted by U.S. forces and the Kabul administration. He said the Taliban categorically reject what he called exaggerated propaganda by the Afghan government. Meanwhile, at least 5 members of the Afghan army have been killed in fighting in the northern Balkh province's Zare district. The army spokesperson claimed 15 Taliban were also killed in the fighting. The official said that the fighting erupted late Friday night after the Taliban fighters attacked an army checkpoint in Zare. However, District Governor of Zaire said that at least 15 soldiers were killed and 20 others were wounded. Separately, 3 civilians were killed in an explosion near Laghman prison in the city of MYANMAR. Moving on, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has made his first public appearance in 20 days, ending rumors about his health. State media said Kim cut the ribbon at the opening of a fertilizer factory in Suncheon, near the capital, Pyongyang. The outlet said Kim was accompanied by several senior officials, including his powerful younger sister, Kim Yo-jong. Kim's last public appearance was on April 11th, when he presided over a Politburo meeting of the ruling Workers' Party. His absence from the April 15th birth anniversary of his late grandfather and national founder Kim Il-sung sparked speculations about his health. The North Korean strongman is known to have health problems linked with obesity and heavy smoking. In Venezuela, 17 inmates have been killed while attempting to escape during a riot at a prison in western Guanare City. A military report said 9 people, including the prison director, were also injured after inmates staged a disturbance of public order. The report said one officer with a megaphone later negotiated with the prisoners and they agreed to withdraw. But it said the military assumes more deaths inside the prison, while opposition lawmaker Maria Martinez said over 40 people died during the scuffle. A prisoners' rights group said the prison was housing 2,500 felons with a capacity to hold a maximum of 750 inmates. We're taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. Welcome back. The European Union has urged Myanmar's all-armed forces to implement an unconditional ceasefire and return to the peace process. In a statement, EU's Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell said several hundreds of Rohingya people have been drifting at sea in appalling conditions for weeks. Borrell said the bloc urges governments in the region to carry out a search and rescue operation for stranded Rohingya. He said Bangladesh earlier granted safe landing and assistance to 400 Rohingya migrants, showing continued generosity and humanity. Borrell said the EU expects other countries to follow suit in providing assistance to refugees. He said the bloc is also willing to provide further support for Rohingya. Amnesty International says more than 750,000 Rohingya refugees have fled Myanmar after it launched a crackdown on the Muslim community in August 2017. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced the launch of a web portal for the second phase of the Ehsaas Cash program. Speaking at a ceremony in Islamabad, Khan said this phase will benefit those rendered jobless by the coronavirus pandemic.
Khan said he is personally monitoring the accountability process for the Corona Relief Fund. He assured people the funds will be utilized in a transparent manner. Meanwhile, Pakistan conducted 9,164 COVID-19 tests yesterday. Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Health, Zafar Mirza, said the countrywide testing capacity will increase further in the future. Mirza said Pakistan recorded 32 casualties overnight, increasing the toll to 417. He said there are over 18,000 infection cases by now, while more than 4,700 patients have recovered.
India has extended its nationwide coronavirus lockdown for another 2 weeks after 4th May. The government has allowed considerable relaxations in lower-risk districts marked as green and orange zones. In a statement, Home Affairs Ministry said some activities will remain prohibited throughout the country, regardless of the zone. It said those include travel by air, rail, and metro, and interstate movement of people by road. The ministry said schools and colleges, hotels, restaurants, shopping malls, and places of worship will remain closed. It added there will be no restriction on the movement of goods between states and on the manufacturing and distribution of essential items. The biggest and most economically important cities, including New Delhi, Mumbai, and Bengaluru, will also be classified as red zones. India has reported more than 37,000 COVID-19 cases and over 1,200 deaths. Italy's Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has apologized for the economic hardships people endured during the coronavirus pandemic. This comes as government funds announced weeks ago are yet to be transferred to citizens' bank accounts. In a Facebook post, Conte said there have been and still are some delays in the funds being disbursed. He said the funding mechanism has been proving complicated. The Prime Minister said he will continue to press for payments and funding to be completed as soon as possible. Authorities in the country are due to start rolling back the coronavirus restrictions from Monday. Conte said that this will enable 4 million people to go back to work and start reviving the stalled economy. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says Berlin will make a significant financial contribution for the development of a COVID-19 vaccine. She said Germany is taking on this responsibility, making sure that once a vaccine is developed, it benefits all people. In her weekly video podcast, Merkel said that an additional 8 billion euros were needed for the development of a vaccine to treat COVID-19. The German Chancellor also vowed to lead the way on global cooperation. On Friday, world leaders pledged to accelerate work on tests, drugs and vaccines. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the objective at a global pledging effort on 4th May would be to raise 7.5 billion euros. She said this will ensure ramping up work on prevention, diagnostics and treatment. The American Food and Drug Administration has authorized the emergency use of Gilead drug REMDESIVIR for COVID-19 patients. The approval comes after researchers reported the drug shortened the recovery time. In a letter, the FDA said the authorization does not mean the drug is proven to work by the usual benchmarks, but it has potential benefits to treat COVID-19. At a White House meeting, Gilead Chief Executive Daniel O'Day called the move an important first step and donated 1.5 million vials of the drug. US President Donald Trump also welcomed the decision and called it an important treatment.
Pleased to announce that Gilead now has an EUA from the FDA for remdesivir. And you know what that is because that's been the hot thing also in the papers and in the media for the last little while. An important treatment for hospitalized coronavirus patients.
Runners and cyclists are returning to the streets of Barcelona after 7 weeks of coronavirus-related restrictions, but life still isn't back to normal, with authorities keeping a shift system in place to keep the number of people out on the streets under control. More in this report.
Spain is one of the countries hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, suffering more than 25,000 deaths and over 216,000 confirmed cases. But the outbreak has passed its peak and now people are finally emerging from their homes. For the citizens of Barcelona, this feels like a historic moment. At the same time, there is an understanding that the virus can still threaten lives.
I think that it's very great to go out, so I decided to run today. And I feel like in a historical moment, like with everybody out like this. So I'm very happy about this, and I think that people are quite respecting the rules. So I think it's a very happy moment.
For now, going outdoors is a scheduled activity. Adults are allowed to take short walks and play sports from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. From noon to 7 p.m., the streets are reserved for children, with the remaining slots set aside for the elderly and other groups vulnerable to the virus. How effective this approach will be remains to be seen.
For me personally, it is being incredible that I can finally go out after so long. It just seems a bit strange to me that there are these time shifts because in the end there are many people at the same time in the same place. There isn't so much space for people who run. I don't know the solution to this either, but I see that here on the beach promenade there are so many people as in summer.
The daily number of deaths are also rising more slowly in the rest of Europe, but there are fears that COVID-19 could emerge as a strong threat once more in different parts of the world, including the developing world.
The World Health Organization says the coronavirus pandemic still remains a public health emergency of international concern. The global health body said countries must follow WHO's advice, which is constantly reviewed and updated with new information on the virus. This report has details.
The WHO has reported more than 84,000 cases of the novel coronavirus worldwide in the past day. At a press conference, the body's head Tedros Adhanom said the WHO did not waste time in responding to the coronavirus. He said the virus spreads more widely in countries with weak health systems.
The COVID-19 crisis has illustrated that even the most sophisticated health systems have struggled to cope with the pandemic. WHO has grave concerns about the potential impact the virus could have as it starts to accelerate in countries with weaker health systems.
Google travel data shows people in Australia and the US have returned to parks and jobs fatigued with lockdown measures. But more people stayed home in Brazil, Japan, and Singapore as these countries' infection cases surged. Ireland has also announced the first steps to easing restrictions and laid out a roadmap for a gradual reopening of the economy. To bring Britain back on its feet, the UK has provided more than 122,000 coronavirus tests in a single day, passing the government's target.
Our full-scale test, track and trace model will drive the infection rate down, and the lower the R and the lower number of new infections, the more effective the track and trace system will be. Tracking and tracing will allow us to get R down and hold R down, and so it will allow us to lift lockdown measures.
Meanwhile, Russia has registered a record number of COVID-19 cases for the third day in a row, as nearly 8,000 more people tested positive for the virus.
70,000 people have been evacuated from eastern Uzbekistan as hundreds of houses submerged under waters from a collapsed dam. Government said 56 people were injured in the Sirdaryo region after the Sardoba dam partially collapsed due to heavy rain. Rescue efforts are underway in the region as the water flow was redirected to local rivers. Speaking at the site, President Shavkat Mirziyoyev said all necessary steps will be taken to address the crisis. Completed in 2017, the Sardoba Dam is used for irrigating agricultural lands in the provinces of Sirdaryo and Jizakh. We're taking a short break, but stay tuned for more news. President of the OPEC conference has called on OPEC and non-member countries to completely implement the oil production limiting agreement. In a statement, Algeria's Minister of Energy, Mohamed Arkab, said it is important to fully implement the output cut as oil market faces unprecedented difficulties. The minister said all signatories of the deal have an objective to ensure conformity of over 100%. The deal to cut oil production carried into effect on 1st May with the purpose to eliminate the demand and offer imbalance worldwide. The agreement will be in effect for 2 years and the deal's parameters will be revised in December 2021. Iraq's revenues from oil exports have dropped by over 50% in April due to the drastic drop in international oil prices. In a statement, the Iraqi oil ministry said Baghdad exported over 100 million barrels of crude oil in April. It said this amounts to generating oil at an average of $14 per barrel. The ministry said their revenue was less than half the country earned in March at an average of $28 per barrel. Meanwhile, Russia raised oil and gas output in April to over 11 million barrels a day. The energy ministry said Moscow is likely to cut its oil production by 2.5 million barrels per day in May and June. Global oil prices have crashed due to coronavirus as reduced transportation and slowed industrial activity has brought about a sharp fall in demand. In Pakistan, the inflation rate fell to 8.5% in April due to subdued demand in the economy. This comes as COVID-19 partial lockdown in the country kept major economic activities at a standstill. Pakistan Bureau of Statistics said the pace of inflation slowed down both in urban and rural areas. PBS calculates the inflation by monitoring prices of 356 commodities in 35 cities and 244 goods in 27 rural markets. It said the 8.5% inflation is the lowest in the past 10 months. The government has set up a think tank led by finance advisor Abdul Hafiz Sheikh to devise economic policies for the next fiscal year. US Tesla's founder Elon Musk has wiped $14 billion off the car maker's value after tweeting that his share price was too high. The tweet also knocked $3 billion off Musk's own stake in Tesla as investors promptly bailed out of the company. In a tweet, Musk said in his opinion the Tesla stock price was too high and vowed to sell his possessions. In 2018, a tweet about Tesla's future on the New York stock market led to regulators fining him $20 million. It was also agreed to have Musk's all further posts on the platform pre-screened by lawyers. Tesla's share price has surged this year, putting the electric car maker's value at close to $100 billion. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.